Wow, good day.
Okay, we are now live.
Oh, okay. Well, how's everyone doing?
Doing good. Well, thanks.
Very nice, very nice. My name is Marty Merritt with the Black Foxes, and I just wanted to introduce our first industry talks and open and honest conversation about the state of BIPOC in the outdoor industry. And today, our first conversation will be with three special guests, and I will let them introduce themselves with their names and a slight, a short description of where they work, what they do. And we'll start with Brooke.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Brooke Hopper. I work for Liv Cycling as their global marketing manager. I've been with Liv for about 4 years, and I'm really excited to be here and to be speaking with you today.
Okay, great. And next up, we'll go ladies first. We'll go with Kate.
Hi, my name is Kate Powlison. I've been at SRAM for about 5 years as a brand manager for our road product. And before that, I spent 8 years at People for Bikes, a national bike advocacy organization. And yeah, really excited to be here for this discussion.
Thanks a lot. All right, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Brad Sheehan. I'm one of the co-founders, the CEO and the designer at Velocio Apparel. We launched the brand this is our 7th year developing cycling apparel.
Perfect. Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. And I want to pause with some of us, with some of the Black Foxes for a little introduction as well. Let's start with you up top, Aisha.
Oh, me. I'm Aisha McGowan. I race for Liv and for SRAM, which is really awesome. And I do a lot of advocacy for better representation for people of color in cycling.
We'll go with Will.
Hey, I'm Will. I ride road, mountain, gravel, but preference probably gravel more than anything. One of the Black Foxes, and that's pretty much it.
Perfect. Thanks. And Shay?
Hi, I am Shay Shakoya Bailey with the Black Foxes, also President Major Taylor in Pittsburgh, and I ride road, been dabbling in mountain biking, and hopefully doing some longer gravel trips later down the road too.
Perfect. And Jalen.
Hey everybody, Jalen Bazil. I am a trip leader, guide, facilitator, community organizer, and love gravel riding.
Perfect. And my name is Marty. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. I live in Girona, Spain. I am an ambassador for SRAM, Velocio. I am a Black Fox. And also Giant. And I prefer riding road bikes, but I also like fixed gear bikes, and I'm looking forward to gravel. And that's about it. It's good to have everyone here. Okay, let's get started. I wanted to start off with some of the questions that our community has brought up to us. So we'll just get right into it. I'm sure that these questions will bring some nice back and forth here. The first question I would like to ask is, or that one of our community members would like to ask, is how would you define an anti-racist business? I don't know. I guess I should have talked about order first. Brad.
Great. That's a big question. I think that the main thing and the thing that we're seeing today with a lot of businesses is that, business, say 10 years ago, had sort of the luxury of being able to kind of sit back and like hide from a lot of these discussions and questions and responsibilities. In that, I think a lot of people felt that because they weren't necessarily, businesses weren't considered people, that they didn't really have to be a part of this conversation. And I think what you're seeing now, and more specifically over the last several months, is that people want more from businesses. People want you to have a voice and to have a stance and to have a position on these things, because really, and the way that we've kind of talked about it internally at Velocio is that our company is as a collection of people. So you have a responsibility both to the people that work for you as well as your customers to kind of have a position on all these topics. And I think what it means to be an anti-racist business is to have that stance and to have that position and to both kind of tell your followers or your supporters, or however you want to define them, where you stand on certain issues, and then have specific guidelines, specific initiatives, specific plans on how you plan on following through with those beliefs, and to kind of hold yourself to that standard as a company.
Okay.
I can jump in after Brad, if that is good for the group.
Yeah. No, it's open. I speak freely. I don't want to have to be like, okay, Kate, okay, Brad, okay, that. Like, let's make it like we're sitting at a table right now.
Got it. I really wish we were. I really wish we were able to. Well, first I want to recognize one element of this conversation, and that is the fact that the panel, besides the Black Foxes, are all comprised of white people. And I do think that's something very, that shows the work that needs to be done in the bike industry. I do believe that the bike industry is way behind even the outdoor industry space. I worked in the outdoor space for 10 years at the North Face, and that was always, creating more opportunities for people of color was something that was regularly discussed as well, both internally and externally to our audiences. But to answer the question, I guess I just wanted to put that out there, is that, to me, an anti-racist company or brand really reflects the contributions and the interest of diverse cultural and social groups, like in our mission, our products, and also the service that we provide. In order to be anti-racist, I think we need to also be active and acting on a commitment for the eradication of social oppression in all forms within our organization and with our employees, as well as in any way that we can. But also we need to follow through on sort of the broader external social responsibilities. And that includes supportive efforts to eliminate all forms of social oppression, racial injustice, and it involves us all to support the efforts to expand this ideology in our industry and to work with leaders like yourselves to actually make a difference and do what we say we want to do.
Okay.
It's kind of like being a person, right? Where there's no, like Brad, to your point, like companies kind of thought there was a neutral ground here that you're not racist, but we're not going to be anti-racist either. We're just going to sit in the middle and be safe. And then you come to understand there is no middle. You're either anti-racist or you're racist, and you're never done either. Like it's, you can be anti-racist with one action, and then the next day, go ahead and do something that's racist. And so it's kind of, I think we're coming to understand that it's a constant type of work, and past actions don't necessarily mean future anti-racism. So I kind of see it at that, like at a personal level too. It's the same sort of evolution.
Yeah. I agree. What do the Foxes have to say about this? I mean, that after what we've heard, guys, has this inspired you guys any thoughts on what you've heard or anything you'd like to add to this particular issue? Okay. All right then. Well, we'll go on. We'll go on. No, I think I'll take that silence as basically complete.
I mean, I appreciate hearing that coming from like such specific like key points in the industry, like apparel, clothing, and components and whatnot. Like very often on social media, like you have to pull teeth to get people to even like mention the word racism. Like it's like they do the most to avoid saying, you know, to appease certain crowds. It seems, you know, I can't speak for why. So just the idea of like one, obviously doing this, and then two, hearing like, yeah, like there are people that get that just because you didn't do something one day doesn't mean that you won't screw up down the line. And we know like for a lot of people that's like the scary part, but you know, it's why we're here, to talk it and make it easy. Hopefully you don't have to be worried about making that mistake because you won't make it. You know?
Yeah, it's crazy. You mentioned like Will, about like you can't, like people don't want, it's like the elephant in the room, you know, and whenever it's brought up, a lot of times like you can sense, at least I can sense sometimes when the topic of like race or whatever, even in general, like not just in the cycling industry, but in general comes up, I can always sense, not always, but in more cases, like 8 out of 10 times, there's like from the listener, I'm getting some like kind of like light defensiveness, right? Or like, oh no, like, yeah, I mean, like that they're racist over there, but no, not me, type of, you know, thing. Like, oh, well, you know, your actions are showing something different. You know?
I mean, for me, it's like I've been writing about this topic for a couple years, and I've always found myself trying to like be honest and be truthful and forthcoming, but also like dance around what I know will shut people down. Just because if they shut me out, then I don't know, it just feels like I can't win to get people to pay attention. But I actually have a friend who is a white woman, and we say that she lets me borrow her white woman pearls. And so she'll like proofread the things that I write and tell me where she's like has to clutch her pearls. And I'll like rephrase it in order to like reach a broader audience. And it's ridiculous that I even feel like I need to do that. But like after all of this black boom or whatever we want to call it, like people are, like Will said, like they're saying the word racism out loud freely. And I'm like, my brain is still exploding. I don't know what's going on, but welcome. I'm glad everyone has arrived.
And a principle from like trip leading and organizing groups that I bring into this work is meeting people where they are. And the position of being anti-racist or racist isn't a fixed position. You can always move along the spectrum, but the thing that has to be done is taking note of like where you are and having that self-awareness, and within a company having to meet the people, you know, a company is comprised of people and individuals, meeting those people where they are along that journey and sort of like moving them in the right direction. And it's very incremental, it's very slow, but that process is so important. And being on the other side of that is like somebody who wants in on this and has been kind of like patiently, frustratingly knocking at the door. You know, it can be hard to watch that process, but I am very grateful for like people starting and meeting people where they are and like starting that process within their own organizations. Because like Aisha just said, we've been talking about this for decades, like if not centuries.
Mm-hmm. True indeed. Which kind of leads us to the next, to well, it's connected. It's totally connected. Mm-hmm. And I think some of us are curious as to how are how are you or and your companies actively working to be an anti-racist business? People want to know.
Am I starting with that one too?
It's you
different people.
It could be anyone, right? Jump in as comfort levels permit.
That's another big question. I think, you know, if I can, I kind of wanted to kind of back up and on this a little bit, because there are so many different aspects of what go into where to even start with that, and like what to consider. And I actually spent quite a bit of time over the last week just kind of reading through all of the different posts on your website about the manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought there were some really good points in there. And then also just some notes that I put together kind of on this topic. But I think it really revolves as a business position, trying to be more inclusive and trying to be more open about positions around racism or being anti-racist as an organization. I think the first thing that we have to do, and I agree with Brook in that, you know, the three people that are coming at this from the industry are all white, and I'm probably, like, in terms of stereotypes, like the furthest away from, you know, what you would expect being the white guy in the room. But I would say that the first thing that we have to do is acknowledge what's going on as an industry. And then the second thing is we have to not assume that we know how to fix it. In that, like, I don't have the same experiences that you do. So for me to assume that I know how to change that situation or improve this, or to be able to connect with different communities, is just, it's arrogant, and it's not really going to help us move forward. So one thing that we've looked at carefully, and one thing that we're working on all the time, is looking at hiring BIPOC people into our company, so that in roles that are either leadership roles or roles that have a significant impact on the direction of the company, and how we are perceived, how we communicate, who we connect with. And I end up spending a lot of time listening to those folks in our company, more than telling them what to do, because I feel like, you know, I need to learn what those experiences are like, and I need to be able to help shape kind of the direction of the overall company with their input. So I think that's a huge part of how we're going to be able to be more anti-racist, both as our company, but as an industry. I think hiring is a huge part of it.
For context, how big, like how many employees or staff or whatever?
We're very small. We have 12 people in the company right now.
And how many of them are not white or white men?
25% of our company is BIPOC people, and half of our company is women.
That's great to hear, Brad. And as a women's brand, it's interesting to hear that, because I do believe in the bike industry. We're still focusing, or actually fighting may not be the right word, but I don't believe that women have a voice or a seat at the table yet. And I learned that I actually have that white woman lens, and that's my blind spot. And when I think about all of the changes that I want to make, and I think about when Aisha first came to me with the idea of what has become the Black Foxes, I agree, sometimes we need to get out of the way. And that's what I was what I was doing here at Live, was trying to elevate the stories of our athletes, but also looking at internally what systems really needed to be challenged. What I have found is that awareness, to Brad's point, is extremely important, and I believe we've gotten to this awareness, and how we are working towards becoming an anti-racist company. I feel like we need to start with goodwill and humility, as well as courage, because what I've found is that a lot of our employees don't have the tools they need to have the conversations that need to be had. And so instead of being leaders in this, in finding racial justice and in creating more multicultural organizations, they are afraid to speak, so they say nothing, and that gets us nowhere. So I do think, we do have to start with awareness, as well as create benchmarks that we can begin to measure sort of what we're doing around BIPOC, and getting more employees of color, also looking at all of the staff from around the world, because we are a global organization, and I work for the global team. I actually report into Taiwan. And this is something that we're all working towards, next steps as a training, as well as an equity audit alongside of that, to make sure that we are giving our stakeholders the tools that they need to be leaders in this conversation. So I think that we're starting very much at ground zero of this in the bike space, but I'm inspired by each of you and of the work Aisha has done with Liv and on her own over the last few years. And we are looking at that training as our best opportunity to make the biggest difference in the near term.
I think we lost Smarty for a second, so we'll just keep it moving. Kate, did you have an answer to that on behalf of SRAM, or what you're doing at SRAM?
I mean, what Brook is saying about looking internally is where a lot of our work is focused now. It can be easy to put something up on Instagram, or to really focus on representation, or things that kind of display that you're doing the work. But it seems like a lot of the harder work is more internal and takes more time, and can't be solved within a quarter or within a week. And so it's been, again, with kind of trying to take myself and the other white women at SRAM too, who have been trying to drive some of this work internally. It's been a really big wake-up call for us, I think, to really change the way that we're making our efforts, not, instead of trying to do the work ourselves, or to to do what we think is necessary, to take a step back and really see, okay, what's going to be sustainable here, and what's going to make a real difference. And it tends to be a little bit more difficult, or it tends to take longer, but it feels like that's what it needs to be sustainable. So, can't hide from what you stand for, and people want to hear from companies, which especially bigger companies, being able to put statements out there and say, this is what we believe in, is, not always as nimble as smaller companies, but looking internally has been the core focus of what we've been doing lately in terms of trying to be more of an anti-racist company. Hey, Marty's back.
I hope that's the only time that happens, but if it happens again, I'll try to get back in. I guess that's what I missed, but between minute 17 and now, I'll just have to check out later. So I assume that was we were talking about the second question about what actions are being taken about being an anti-racist company. All right.
I don't mean to jump in again, but I think that there's a lot more to that question, and not, we could probably talk about that for the rest of the time. There's just a few other things I wanted to touch on. We're looking to kind of providing a platform and providing space for the IPOC folks to be a part of an organization from a an outward perspective, in that you have an opportunity to be a role model, or you have the opportunity to kind of tell your story and share your perspective on being in the outdoors or being in cycling specifically. So having a space for and having a platform using our platform to tell those stories, I think is really important. And not doing it in this sort of tokenistic way that I think is difficult to navigate sometimes, especially from how it can be perceived. But I think it can be done, and I think it then is also connecting with communities and being involved in whether they're clubs or programs locally, to just have additional points of contact with different communities around kind of their experience within cycling, within the outdoor industry, so that we can kind of pull that back into what we're doing and help shape our message.
What about community reach out? Just curious, do you guys have any, is there any actions? I'm glad you brought that up, but are there any actions happening where that's, are there any initiatives that are happening in your companies about actually getting out to some of these, local clubs, doing outreach and on this local organic level? Because I think that goes a long way, when people, I think working down at that level can really work wonders.
Yeah, one thing that a volunteer group at SRAM has done is first of all, it's easy to kind of assume what people's barriers are, and that can be dangerous, instead of actually talking to them and understanding firsthand what barriers might be. So we had a team at SRAM led by Sean Hopkins and David Reyes. They did a survey of the Major Taylor of Chicago Club with help of our research team, to get some better data and hear from the community, okay, what are barriers to being a Black cyclist in Chicago, to better help inform our work, instead of just kind of coming up with what we think the answer is. So Chicago is where SRAM is headquartered, and we're fortunate to have some really great community groups there. Blackstone is another one. So that's one way that we've tried to do community outreach, just to not necessarily do new work, but just to listen firsthand what they have to say.
Good. I mean, are there, and if there is no a Brook brand, are there any communities or any organizations or things that you kind of have maybe earmarked, I think we might want to talk to them or see what they're up to? Is there kind of a working list of people that you might want to start reaching out to?
We do have a list that we're working through, and we do work with some youth organizations. I know Nike is one of them, in different communities. I don't have that, and that's not really kind of under my purview, but I know that those are things that we're actively looking at, and we're also speaking with a lot of our ambassadors to see where within their communities, different organizations or different ways of connecting with the community in a better way.
Yeah, using what you have, ambassadors are already with you, so it's kind of use what you got. Yeah, that's smart.
Marty, I'll just say also on Liv's side, for our how we're moving forward, we're really looking at that external outreach as a great opportunity. To clarify, my role is on the global marketing team. So I don't do much on the community level here in the United States, but we are working on this training, and it would be for all of our staff and our sales teams that are all working within the US, and then looking at building that as a model to roll out globally. So it would be a comprehensive strategy that would include internal and external components. But there are opportunities that we always, when we see them, we try to act. And you guys all have been great at providing us opportunities if we don't know about them. And so I'd say that the Black Foxes and Aisha, even before you were with Liv, you were a great resource for letting us know where opportunities were. And so I think that we will see more of that, and hopefully get more of that community level impact to let our stance as an anti-racist company really be seen and heard.
Awesome. Awesome.
And something I'd love to add with that is this saying that I first heard from Taisha Adams. She's the an outdoor Afro leader here in Colorado, and also the commissioner of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, phenomenal Black woman. She said that, this anti-racism work and community engagement happens at the speed of relationships. And that can take a long time. And particularly when engaging in that kind of work, something that I have, like the lens in which I look through, is I'm not trying to do these one-off events or like a one-time scholarship, or maybe even like, 2-3 times. Like, we're focusing on long-term relationships, which is so important for our communities, because the story of coming in and, cool, we have one scholarship person, or cool, we got some free gear this one year, like that is just so over, and we're not interested in that at all. And so I work with the Colorado Outdoor Education Center, and there's like one side of engaging with communities and building those relationships, which is very organic and, runs its course. But then also there has to be work of like building the inclusive space for when you want those people to, when you want to share that space. And so the work that has been done here, it is predominantly a white staff. I actually, out of the 70 years that this organization has been up and running, am the first full-time person of color that I know of, which is like mind-blowing to me, but whatever. They have taken it upon themselves every week have workshops about anti-racism and about checking their own biases. And it's uncomfortable, and sometimes people, really have a hard time showing up to that, but it has made me feel way more inclusive. And now I'm bringing groups up, like scheduled out now every month, which is amazing, because before I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. And so some examples that have been done so far is like in the last year, this is an outdoor ed center. So like teepees and like a totem pole has been taken down, and that whole curriculum has been like, has just been revised and is ongoing, and partnerships are being built in order to have that be appropriate. Community groups are being engaged with where they are. It's a really easy thing to invite somebody into your space, but if they already have trouble feeling comfortable, then that may not be the best avenue. Instead, meeting them where they are says so much. And so I have been impressed with what the work that they've been doing here. And again, just to reiterate, this work happens at the speed of relationships, which is so important to know, and sort of like an awesome lens to go forward.
What was the name of that organization again?
It's the Colorado Outdoor Education Center.
And is there a curriculum for, is there an actual curriculum for that anti-race? It's I don't want to say workshop, but a curriculum for an anti-racism curriculum, or for this initiative?
It's been ongoing since for the past year and a half, I would say, has been like the meat of it. But the curriculum is just a a pooling of various resources online and through partnerships and relationships that have already been established and that are being cultivated. And it's very much tailored to like in-house. This is specific to our program and our people, which I think is really important because, you know, some suggestions that I gave was like, try to avoid getting like, get away from like the list of definitions in the classroom lecture within your company, because nobody's trying to go back to school and sit in class. But instead, if we can use stories, like I have personally told stories of how I have felt not included in this space, that story really strikes a chord with people, and people can like learn at a much faster rate when they see it's like, oh, I see how you know, they can tap into some of that emotional intelligence. It's like, oh, I now have empathy for how you felt there. So the curriculum is very tailored to the people here in the organization here. Yeah.
I love that, Jalen, the speed of relationships. That's really powerful. And I agree that when you're building community, that it doesn't always happen overnight. And one question, if it's okay for me to ask you guys.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
One question that I have, and you know, as a white woman, and with the 3 panelists being white on this call, one element of looking at this work, and you know, you mentioned scholarships. We're also really working to not have this white savior complex, and you know, that assumes that all people of color are poor, or assumes that people of color aren't riding bikes because they can't afford them. And I feel like in the bike industry, as I experience in the outdoor industry, it takes a lot of education to realize that that is not the case. But when talking about opportunities to diversify, either partnerships, it's not always about charity. And I'm curious what you think about how we as companies could go about contributing to the industry in a way that doesn't feel like we're tokenizing or having a white savior complex. Maybe just some initial steps or examples that you've seen that have worked well.
I'm gonna jump in. I've got a bone to pick with this particular topic. And actually, one of the community questions that came in was this one, where someone was asking, like, are BIPOC actually in the room for the discussions about like the grants and the scholarships and all of these initiatives? Like, it seemed like after George Floyd and the protests and the Black boom, people were like trying to solve problems, but like not really discerning which problems actually needed to be solved. It felt like they were trying to solve their guilt. And so they were starting all these initiatives and scholarships and nonprofits and not asking enough questions, like at the base level of like how to proceed with doing these things, like simple questions, like how do we fund this? Is that model going to actually support the communities that we're trying to serve? Or are we giving companies that have a track record of not being anti-racist, like actually being racist in many ways, are we giving them opportunities to look better without actually doing any real work? Like, I think not that the bike industry has all of the money in the world. There is money there, and it's much easier to throw money at a problem than to actually like get to the root of solving things. Like, anti-racism is not something that can only be solved with money. It's a mindset, it's an act, it's a behavior, it's a lot of things. And for these companies to just be able to throw money at it feels very tokenizing, especially when we're bringing, like, the idea is that we'll get to bring more people of color into the sport, but like, are we bringing them into a place that is safe for them? Are we bringing them into a space that has been designed to help them thrive? Or are we going to bring them in and tokenize them and burn them out, and they'll, you know, head for the hills and never come back? Like, why aren't, I just wish people would ask more questions about what they're actually trying to do when they're starting these initiatives under that umbrella of initiatives? Like, what are you actually trying to fix, or are you just trying to make yourself feel better?
Yeah. Yeah.
And something that I've gotten a lot, particularly because of where we are in year 2020, is companies saying, oh, well, I want to do this. I have this initiative drawn up, but we just don't have the financial means to compensate X, Y, and Z. And my response to that is do some research on the different forms of capital. There's been, many things that companies have way more than just money to offer. And if you don't know the 8 forms of capital, it's social, material, financial, living, intellectual, experiential, spiritual, and cultural. I'll let you do the research. For instance, Black culture has a lot of cultural capital, like Black people. Like we make stuff dope. Like we make it hot. We come in and we it's just nice. So for companies, it's like, cool, you can offer gear, you can offer money, but it's like, whoa, how about you, connect me? I'm a, entrepreneur. I need some soundboarding and some resources in this area of my life. Like, can you, help me in my efforts here? There's many ways to contribute to that you can add to these initiatives that are being drawn up, not just money and gear, because to be honest, gear doesn't pay rent, and money right now, I understand, is tight.
But exposures don't pay rent.
Yeah.
so just I guess it can be like an open and honest conversation with whoever you're trying to work with. They know what they need. They know what they don't need. They know, what they can accept and what will actually help them move forward. Like some people can benefit from exposure or access to whatever. I mean, I think for me, access to opportunity is probably one of the biggest forms of capital that I received in the beginning of whatever it is that I'm doing. Just, a voice and being able to access the right people and the right circles. And so now I'm in a position because of that I can expand to my larger community. Like I have a friend, Jason Marshall, who has a lot of thoughts about a lot of things. But one of the things that he taught me early on was this idea of abundance, where like, for me, it was just like, oh, I just need a frame, or I just need, something to get going. And it's like, you can't do anything with that. Not really, because if you only serve yourself, then it ends with you. Like if something happens to me, then it's over. But if I have abundance, then I can share, then I can, bring other people into the community. And now because of that, we have the Black Foxes, right? Like we have all of these other things that have grown out of that abundance that have just been really awesome. So I think another thing to consider is not just seeing how you can use one individual for your own personal gain as a company or an organization, but seeing maybe there are ways to reach beyond that.
I mean, seeing what you've accomplished there, over the last few years, it gives me chills sometimes, where it's so your network is so much more than just one person, and it helps dispel the myth that Black people are a monolith too, which is just a lesson that our industry is still very much learning. But it's been really amazing to see you put that into action.
Yeah, Jalen, the 8 forms of capital, I think I was just thinking that could be the key to this whole thing. Because we just think, yeah, it's just material and money. Yeah, throw some money at it. Like Aisha says, some frames, take some pictures. We got an ambassador or 2, maybe 2. If you got 2, you're doing really great, right? But no, the 8 forms of capital. I personally, this is the first time I've actually ever heard that, but I am going to do some research on that as well. I think that could be. I think that's something that a lot of companies could take into their boardrooms and start enacting some real change, and enacting change in a way that's different than what we see as what change is being done now. It could be a redefinition of that, I think.
Yeah,
so I think,
and it also allows for creative strategies and initiatives to happen that aren't pressuring anybody, that it, you know, like, you don't want to invest in something that could potentially like tank the company. I get it. Like running a business is a legit thing. So, and there's just, it just opens the playing field of like, oh, this is what we can actually do. It's like that state of mind of abundance, you know, like we actually have a lot here. We're not pigeonholed into one or two ways of contributing, which is, you know, sort of ludicrous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It seems that, you know, I've been reading a lot of the different responses over the last few months from different companies, and it's hard not to think that many of them are written in a boardroom and by a bunch of white guys around in a circle and not really understanding, you know, what's going on and just making these assumptions. But kind of a lot of that stems from, I think, this idea of like us versus them, like we need to do this to appease them, versus a mindset or a different perspective of like, this is a collaborative opportunity. Like if it were more collaborative and people and everyone worked together on this, then everyone's going to benefit. And I think that there's so much concern and fear in some situations over like, well, if we do this, then it's going to cost us this. And we don't know if we're going to get a return on our investment. You know, like so much of this seems to be driven by a spreadsheet, which is really frustrating to see. And it's probably a little bit easier for me to sit here being from a very small company to be able to make pretty big shifts. But I still think that the core of it is about kind of the perspective around how people think about these discussions. And if it is more collaborative and a little bit more integrated, then I think you'd have just a much better outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, this is I love how all this is kind of flowing from one to the other, which kind of goes through the next questions direct. Oh, another thing before I ask you this next question, everyone. The plan initially was for this to be a back and forth. So, Brooke, we appreciate your question, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want it to be like, oh, we're asking you questions and, you know, we watch, right? We want it to be that coffee table, right? We're sitting around the table right now. Yeah. Albeit a virtual one.
So this isn't just a grilling session, like a roast.
Yeah. No.
What time is the roast? I'm just kidding.
No. We're all eating a roast together. That's what's happening.
Marty, you ain't eating no roast. You're vegan.
I'm having yes, it's a vegan.
The tofurkey.
Oh dear.
Tofurkey has made some steps. They've got some new products. I'm a Beyond Burger man. All right. Listen. So yeah, let's make this. So if you have any questions that you might have had, like that you have, like let's do this. But I do want to know. We want to know what are your plans or how are your visions on creating safe and inclusive spaces for BIPOC folks, cyclists, and employees for that matter? Well, posted up there too, so it's on there. There we go. Obviously linked to what we've been piggybacking off of what we've been, where we are right now in the discussion. Yeah.
I think the question is, it's not so much like necessarily just physical spaces, but like how are you making your company culture more welcoming and inviting for not just your staff and employees, but also your consumers? Like, I think, I don't know, at least for me, like I pay a lot of attention to like the behaviors of companies, and especially after all of the stuff that has happened in recent months, like people have been really showing themselves and like where they stand and what they're willing to stand for or not stand for. So I guess I'm assuming, because this was a community question, but I think they wanted to know like what are you as companies doing to make those spaces, better?
I'm happy to go first here. I think that it's a really great question, and it's something that we at Live and with the Giant Group as our parent company, we're looking at that training for employees and what questions we really need to ask ourselves. We need to, look internally at, our culture and what we at Giant Group are doing to create that inclusive culture, and also looking at staff and leadership and how many of our staff and also within leadership are BIPOC. And I think to your point, Aisha, recruiting is one thing, retention is another. And so what are we doing to approach this, we want to hire a more diverse workforce that is more reflective of our organization and of our audience. But we also want to make sure that we're creating safe places so that we can retain employees of color, because, why would a Black person, being the only person, let's say, in an organization, that may not feel like a very welcoming and safe space. So I think just asking these questions and creating the awareness is, where again we're starting as an organization, but we're planning and focusing on how we can have this involved in like all of our strategic planning, in our annual reviews, in all of our values and our goals each year. Is really is diversity reflected in our organizational strategic plan and also in every part of our corporate culture. And it's that awareness that's going to drive this next step in our plans, and again, sort of benchmarks so that we can figure out if we're making progress, so that we're staying true to what we say, both internally and then how we appear externally, so that there's a balance and it doesn't appear as though we're not doing the work that we really need to be doing, both internally and externally.
I would echo that last point that Brooke just made too, about really staying true to who you are as a brand or as a company. And what we've done, especially over the last few months, is look at all the different intersections that our brand has with events or different people within the community, whether they're ambassadors or other brands that we might be connected with through sponsorship or through collaborations, and understand kind of like, does their position is what they're doing, does it align with who we are and what we believe in? And having some hard conversations around like, hey, like, we don't really agree with that, and not just sort of like letting it slide because it's always been that way and because it's not technically us specifically. And I think it's like, it has to do with that part of creating that space. I feel is, if you have people in the organization, you have to also make them feel like they're being supported externally as well. So you're kind of walking the walk and you're saying like, look, we fully support you as an employee, but we also support this cause fully, not just when it's convenient, and not when it doesn't have, a negative impact on our business or our bottom line or whatever. We've had to do that a few times already this year, and I think they're definitely challenging conversations, but in some ways they're very easy as well, because if you're able to sort of hold the line and say like, this is who we are, this is what we believe in, there's no gray area. It's a very simple decision to make. So that's kind of where we're headed and what we're doing. Yeah, I mean, I think again, kind of circling back to Brooke's comment about external and internal aligning.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds
that's
a lot
good.
like, it sounds like you were, sorry,
No,
go ahead.
No, please go.
No, I was saying it sounds like you were kind of alluding to another of the community questions.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah,
which was this one. I guess like someone specifically was asking, like, in creating those safe spaces, like, what are you doing when those spaces are not safe? Like, in a perfect world, it would be an easy situation where you're like, all right, everybody's welcome, but that's just not how our world works. So it's like, how are you actively, oh, I saw a light bulb. Whoa.
Well, I mean, this they all blended in with each other, but for me, it was like, especially after the boom, like super glaring to see companies like say things like, we're gonna do the right thing and like mention that Black Lives Matter or whatever variation of like, we're not racist they wanted to put up, and their entire, or I won't say entire, but a large part of their base online pretty much ripped them. And like, for a lot of these, I'll just say this, people who run the social media accounts, it was like crickets, and they were just like, I can't believe this many racist people follow this company. It's like, yeah, the whole time, like, everyone who gives you money is racist. And look at this, you just saying something like as simple as, these people deserve to be treated like humans. You got
pandering.
Like, you allow those people to feel like they had too much agency in your company for all these years. And now that you want to, like, out of nowhere talk about like humans are humans, that angers the people who you've been profiting from this whole time. And for me, that really like upsets me to see that, because that part doesn't upset me. Like, people are people. The thing that upsets me is when like the companies, that account will backtrack or get quiet after, you know, because it shows me they were just trying to, like what Kate said earlier, like have the appearance of representation mattering, but it doesn't really, it's not really like on the list, I'll say, you know. So.
I spend a lot of time reading those comments, which is kind of scary, but because what I find interesting about it is that in many ways it gives you a kind of a peek behind the curtain in terms of what the company has sort of been built on, like what were their ideals, like how do they align with all different things over the history of the company. So when you see certain companies making those statements and then they just get completely torn apart in the comments, you do have to wonder, like, okay, well, why? Whereas there are other companies that really can say, you know, can make those statements, and you hear very few negative comments to those statements. So that's, from my perspective, kind of indicative of like how have you gotten to that point, right? As a company, like there have to have been steps along the way, decisions that you've made or not made, to put you in a position where when you say that, people either support you or they tear you down. And so it's a good sort of like litmus test as to like, how did you get there? Like, where are you at right now and why?
In relation to the company, you're saying, right, Brad?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, what was the approach to those comments? Like, or, I mean, I can't speak to like what happens internally at Velocio, but like how did you address the discriminatory community members?
I mean, we didn't really have in terms of like social media comments is I think what we're being, you know, specifically talking about. We didn't really have too many negative comments. I think there were like 2, and out of quite a few. And, you know, not to say that we're perfect or great or anything, but you look at other companies in the industry and they'll make a similar statement. and it will be the complete opposite. You know, there might be 2 or 3 positive comments and everything else is negative. I don't know why. I would imagine a lot of it has to do with those hundreds of decisions that were made prior, or the way that their, you know, teams are organized, or the messaging, or the communities, or everything that they connect with, in terms of who's supporting them and who's not. But as any company, like your only, your strength, or the only reason why you're around is because of your customers. So if your customer base, or who your customers are a direct reflection of your company. You know, they're the most real representation of what you believe in.
Aisha, I think to your point also about social media responses, it is interesting to see sort of, you know, to read the comments and also to see how they're responded to, or if they're responded to. At Live, oftentimes our community will kind of come to, not our rescue, but will sort of take care of any comments that are, you know, if let's say someone says, you know, I am never going to buy your stuff again, and they're obviously using hateful and racist language, and we're like, great, we don't want you to buy our stuff. But it's more about the tool, like empowering the people who run the social media site or accounts at each company to have those tools to have that conversation. And so I do think it's important that, you know, people at every level of an organization are, you know, provided the opportunity to, you know, to learn about and to have those access to those tools so that they can have these conversations. And we have you know, we always are tracking comments and trying to decide when and or if we engage. And that usually has to do with sort of the momentum behind the comment. But I do think, you know, one thing that we are doing, again, to create a safer space is just creating a employee code of conduct that is for everyone across the board. And it will speak to all aspects of, you know, what we believe in, what we stand for, or as an organization. And it's going to be very easy for our sales staff, because I think it was, you know, the question was about what are you going to do for with employees that maybe, or if we have discriminatory community members. Thank you for putting that back up, because I couldn't remember. But yeah, you know, it's really about tools for everyone at every level to feel empowered to have that conversation and to very powerfully respond, and also just focusing on that code of conduct. So it is really well known at every level what our organization believes in.
I think you were, I mean, I totally cut off Kate, and I'm sorry. But I think you were also getting at the idea of like, what about your employees or your peers or your, you know, internally, like, what do you do about those folks? That was also a community question that we had.
Yeah, I think that code of conduct has been something that's been identified here. And, you know, again, we have different brands under the one umbrella of our parent company, Giant Group. And, you know, our audiences are different. And I'm sure Kate, you know, managing the SRAM Road account versus the SRAM Women's or the mountain bike account, you know, I think there's a lot of different ways that companies manage that. And it's been a learning process for sure.
Yeah, back to Brad's point of like, you create those safe spaces over time. Like, you can't just take one action and demonstrate that you have a safe space. Like, you need to earn people's trust. And like, when we across, I think, the 5 brand accounts at SRAM. So Rock Shock, Zip, SRAM Road, SRAM MTV, and Cork. We all posted the same Black Lives Matter statement after George Floyd's death. And the reactions were really telling. They demonstrated what Brad was talking about, where, you know, some of the accounts hadn't ever gone there with their audiences and hadn't demonstrated that they were a safe space. So they had a lot of negative and inflammatory responses. Whereas some of our other accounts, we've tried over time to show that this is important to us. So I think it is true. You can't just say you're a safe space with one action. You have to earn it over time.
Yeah. When I remember seeing the post. I remember when I saw it, I was just like, well, I mean, with the SRAM family post, I was like, yes, you know, because I knew it was real already, just because of who you are. But after having that feeling, I was like, oh, let me check, because you're a huge company, right? You know, Brad, just to go back to what you were saying too about the social media response to when you did your post. You're a smaller company than SRAM or Live and Giant, which in a way I think is kind of advantageous, because you have, like, Velocio has a way of kind of molding like the way you do business to attracting the type of customers that are gonna buy the product, right? SRAM, on the other hand, is a huge giant. Live, you know, it says in the name. There's gonna always be a giant, you know, range of replies. So I remember when I saw the post the day, and I remember, like, after having that feeling, I was like, I need to come back to this. I was busy at the time because I want to see what people are gonna say. And I remember I personally got into it with some of the members. I was like, oh no, man, like my angry thumbs were on fire, you know, for a little bit. And then Sean said something that piggybacked off something Sean said. I'm like, yeah, you know, like, but it's good. I'm so happy when I saw that. And Giant, Live did the same thing. Fuji Bikes did the same thing. Trek did the same thing, right? But it was like, gonna call it out. I mean, but when I saw the replies, and it was such a mixed bag. It was disturbing to see all of the racist and hateful language, but it was also gave hope to see all of the other community members who had stepped up and were like, no, you know. And in some very few cases, there actually ended up some actual discussions started, like actual productive type talk started happening. Maybe 2 out of 10 cases. But still,
I think those are really good points, and I would say yes, we're definitely somewhat advantageous for us in that we are quite small and nimble, and we're able to make some pretty big changes for us pretty quickly. But I would also say that it's one of those things that it's not like there's no finish line. It's a process. It's something you have to continue to work on. And even though we feel like we've done quite a few different things that sort of show our kind of our response to various communities and social causes and so forth, and have a fairly progressive stance on a lot of issues, we had some comments before we put out that statement that were like, where are you guys? What's going, like, why haven't you said anything yet? You know, and we're like internally like trying to process all of this and trying to figure out like, is this a place for us like right now to be saying something, and trying to just understand the whole situation as quickly as possible. So I think what it underscores is that it doesn't matter if what you've done in the past or even what you did yesterday, like you have every single day, you have to continue that journey or that process. And it kind of also goes back to the questions or the discussion about how, you know, certain people feeling like, or certain companies feeling like they just sort of check the box and move on. That's just not how this is going to be addressed. And
yeah. Oh, all right. All right. So let me. Great points. Thank you guys so much. This is going great. Oh God, I hope we can keep going. This is awesome. Next question I want to ask is, well, I have two that I'm kind of on the fence with. And we'll start with this one. Like in your companies, in your respective companies, who has the decision making power, and do you have any BIPOC in any leadership positions in your companies?
That's an issue that we're failing at right now at SRAM, and I think is one of the most important things that we could do, and I think we're pushing our leadership to do. A lot of the internal anti-racism work is sort of falling on the same people, the same volunteer working groups who are kind of, adding on to their daily jobs as engineers or whatever to do this. And not only do we need more dedicated resources, but we need them in the most powerful positions in the company. That feels like a way that will really, make a meaningful progress here, and definitely would like to see that happen at SRAM.
For our organization, it's a little different only because everyone actually in our C-suite is not white. We're a Taiwanese-based company, and even when you look at the makeup of the executive team, there are, our chairperson is a woman, our chief marketing officer is a woman. Where I feel we have a huge opportunity is actually within each company, and for our organization, that's called sales companies that we work with around the world. And predominantly those are managed and run by men, and primarily white men for the majority of the countries. So, that is something that is an unfortunate fact. And in the bike industry, I think it's more often the norm. And that's when I talk about like starting from like step one or step zero. That's really where I feel like we are as an industry, because there are, BIPOC representing, a lot of employees, but not necessarily at the executive or decision-making level. And that is something I hope that we see change. But, I think it has to do with recruiting and how you're finding employees. A big barrier is just lack of headcount, in the bike industry. And it's hard to answer a question that might seem easy, like, well, just hire a person of color on your team, while jobs are being lost in the industry overall. So what should be really easy to do is actually a lot more challenging than some might think, to get a full-time headcount on a team, and then also figuring out that strategy of not just looking for people that are a good corporate fit or a good fit for the corporate culture because they ride bikes, because chances are that's a white man, right? So where we go to recruit talent, but also having open headcount to recruit for is a challenge. But I think it's very important to change the demographics of this industry.
Yeah,
one of my colleagues, Gary Chu, who runs our global test team, has this great way of phrasing it as like, instead of looking for a culture fit, like we should be looking for a culture add at our organization. And that really goes into, okay, does this person look like me? Did they ride a bike like me and everything? And if we only try to hire for this exact model, then we're really narrowing ourselves. So the idea of a culture add is something that I really like that he said.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would.
Sorry,
No. With us again, I think we have a bit of an advantage given our size, and how we're able to make decisions fairly quickly. We do have I would say currently we have two BIPOC folks in our company that have pretty significant roles in terms of the direction of what we're doing. One is directing our entire events program, which obviously doesn't look like much these days, but will be pretty pivotal in our strategy for next year. And it really shapes kind of like where we're going, what we're doing, and how we connect with all of our community. So that's, I think, pretty important. And then our visual brand is run by another Black woman, and I think having kind of that visual language around what the brand looks like is hugely important to how we're perceived, especially a brand like ours that is so driven by kind of our brand identity and the visual aspects of who we are. So we're trying to continue to kind of build our team to include more and more diversity, and having them in roles that are very inclusive in our in our decisions, and kind of shape what our brand looks like, how we speak, the products we produce, all those types of things.
Yeah, definitely. And you also, like you said, like Brad, like you said it again, just to go back to the fact that the size of Velocio as a company, you are in a position, a very unique position, in companies that have a similar size team as yours, to actually build the base of who you are as a company, right? Because I mean, what's going to happen? Velocio's not getting smaller; it's going to grow. That's what happens. Yeah, companies grow, right?
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut
No,
you
no.
off. We can obviously affect the percentage mix much more dramatically with one hire or two hires, but it's not to say that we have it necessarily easier either, because when you have a company that's relatively unknown and you're trying to attract top talent from any industry, you're asking people to take a bit of a risk in saying, like, we're sustainable, we're growing, we're doing everything that we need to do, and this is their career. So they're having to make that decision of, like, do I come on board? And a couple of the other things that we're doing, I guess, internally is, and again, an advantage to a smaller team is that every week we have an all-team call, and we have other team calls within the organization that include a lot of different people from a lot of different perspectives. So having that dialogue constantly and having it be a very collaborative experience where I'm not the person in the room just saying, okay, you go do that, you do that. A lot of them are giving me a hard time about, things I need to do differently or whatever, jokingly, like, so I think it sort of the camaraderie that we have and the sort of very team focused atmosphere of how we work. And I think that's super, and it kind of goes back to building trust thing that we were talking about earlier too.
So this is awesome. The flow is amazing. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Marty, can I say something real quick? Could you put the question up one more time?
Okay.
Could you show up the
for
question
sure.
real quick? I just want to reference on this topic of I've done some a little bit of consulting with with organizations or companies on this particular topic of diversifying their staff, and I just have to speak frankly. In my experience, I think many companies the companies I've worked with, they don't actually know what that looks like to diversify their staff, and it's frustrating because it's like logically on paper, it's like, oh, we just need to go and like hire somebody else that's not us. But my question that I've asked is like, okay, who are you willing to fire? Who are you willing to let go in order to create space? And maybe it's not letting somebody go, but it's in what ways are you going to actually create space for this, like, as Kate said, to add, a culture add? Because like the company, just where people are, companies are made up of individuals. Where people are, they don't know what it looks like to bring somebody else in and actually let them start taking responsibility for parts of the company and taking it in a different direction or taking it in a new direction. And it's just frustrating to hear companies speak to this topic without really being about the work that it takes to make those spaces inclusive and to actually support people coming into those roles. And I just want to say that because it happens more times than not. And as somebody who has been in that role, as I come in as like the diversity, it's not a safe space and it doesn't feel supportive.
There was a community question that sort of liaisoned out of that.
Yeah. And yes, actually directly out of this. And this is going to be kind of an imaginary. Let's imagine for the future. Okay. So how would you imagine your company would change, but not just your company, but the industry in general, but starting with the company, if you did have more BIPOC in leadership positions? So now we get to,
like, what to you is the benefit of that, other than just looking like you're doing the diversity? Like, I think there are actual benefits, and I guess Brad has seen a few actual benefits already, but like, how do you envision that being beneficial on a like business level and not just like diversity is great?
Well, I think you bring up a great point about the business case. And I think, as part of a public company, it's important to figure out how to walk the line of doing the right thing and creating shared value and really figuring out how to infuse that into your entire organization. I also think, we really need to focus on accountability. So I can imagine how frustrating, Jalen, it is to sort of go into an organization and then not feel as though it's a safe space. We are talking about this, but I want to make sure that we are accountable for our goals, and that this, to Brad's point earlier, we're not, this isn't like one and done or let's check the box. It's a continual evolution. I imagine that our industry would be much more, would have a lot more opportunities for all people to have, to ride bikes. I feel like we're an exclusive industry in the sense that, it's almost like a boys' club. It feels like, I know, to a lot of women, and I couldn't imagine how hard it would be to be a woman of color walking in to work for a bike company and being surrounded by all white men. To me, that I can't even imagine what that would be like. So, I think that when we look at what we would be, I think we'd be a lot more successful. I think we'd be selling a lot more bikes. I think we would have more of this abundance mentality that Aisha, you spoke to, instead of the scarcity mentality that, oh no, it's us versus them. I think that people in the bike industry are scared because a lot of them are white men, and they are afraid that their share of what they have is going to go away by bringing more people in, as opposed to like making the pie bigger, and then we all get a bigger slice of the pie. But yeah, I think, business-wise, we'd be way more successful, and we'd be more relevant in the world right now, where I feel we're really not.
Okay. Listen, here's one that I'm actually one of our community members, but also one that I think is a fun question. And are there hard conversations that are happening in your social circles? So we can expand this to from the boardroom table, including the boardroom table, but to in general in life. Like, are you having hard conversations with people about these issues?
Yes.
Mm. Here we go. All
Cracking your
right.
knuckles, Marty.
I'm waiting.
expand on
I'm
that
not
a little
talking
bit
about
if
right
you'd
now.
like. No, we've had quite a few conversations, especially over the last several months, around it kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier about the events we choose to go to, the other brands we choose to work with or not, sponsorships, collaborations.
I'm going to interrupt you. I think this question is specific to your personal life and not necessarily your company organizational life.
Yeah, this is a fun question.
Oh, fun.
I mean, they're all fun, but
Yeah.
this is like outside of the office fun. This is Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
You know, we're after work or we're at the table.
I see.
Okay.
Still yes, but yeah, probably not as often.
Oh, sorry, Brad.
No, go ahead.
I just because it just happened recently, I had an enlightening experience in my neighborhood when I put a Black Lives Matter sign in my front yard, and realizing that people who I thought were my friends were no longer communicating or speaking to me, and my daughter was not allowed to play with their kids any longer, and that is really sad because it's. Again, to Will's point earlier, like a human is a human, something so simple yet, so obvious. To me, I'd like to use it as a learning opportunity for my daughter mostly, because, she's like, well, why can't I play with them? And, we're outdoors, COVID, safe anyway, but now it's a harder conversation. And asking why we need to put a sign up like that in our yard. And it's because we want to, have that conversation with our neighbors. And we want to, learn from other people's experience. And yeah, I was called a libtard. I didn't even really know that was a thing or a word until recently, but
where do you live?
A libtard.
Lib, yeah, with a beat, like a liberal. It's like a derogatory term for a liberal, apparently. I live in California, in Ventura, where I have a great group of friends, and socially we are all very aligned. Patagonia is based here in Ventura, and yeah, so I was, I had a nice little bubble, and that bubble was burst because I, put something out that they didn't agree with. But yeah, I was shocked, and the way they behaved with their kids, and having to have that conversation was a hard one with my daughter. But yeah, that just happened recently.
I just imagine, like, what conversations are they having with their kids, and why they can't play with your daughter? You know what I mean? So which is like what are they saying to their kids? It's crazy. I don't know. I mean, it's just like, as you were telling your story, I'm like, what are those families telling their kids, and why they can't play with Brooke's daughter anymore? Like, what could their excuse be?
Well, the sad thing is, I don't know if they're even saying it or if the rant continues. I'm not too concerned with this individual watching this, but yeah, it's been really, it kind of has been, enlightening in the sense that we're not having we're not having a conversation about it. We're just like, we don't exist any longer to them. So yeah, my daughter's she's 7 in 2nd grade, and she and we had to sit down, my husband and I, and kind of explain to her what we believe, and then that they just didn't agree and didn't want their kids playing with her anymore. So yeah.
It's revealing. I mean, it's sad, but I mean, most lessons that are life-changing lessons are the ones that are the most difficult to deal with,
It seems that they're also trying to politicize it, clearly, with that phrase, to kind of continue, to kind of perpetuate the status quo, right? Like, so let's make it about politics and not make it about race, so that we can kind of like cement this situation that we're in.
Yeah.
Like, why are those two connected?
Yeah.
What about,
Go ahead.
no, I was gonna ask, like, what about you, Kate? You're like we've had conversations before and we're both kind of awkward and quiet, but like I want to specifically like say that I want to hear from you. So like, are you having these conversations or?
Yeah, but I think the most notable and meaningful ones aren't the ones that are hard in the way of like, wow, that person is being super racist or super conservative, like really gonna have to change their point of view. The harder actions that like I've been having and I've seen like my husband take and encouraged him to make are more of those ones where it's kind of like it's very subtle almost, where it's like, hey, you know, X person I work with, you know, you kind of said this way, and do you understand what it means, and that sort of thing. Like they haven't been the, you know, oh man, like that person is so racist. It's been kind of like those kind of, almost like micro interactions that where it would be really easy to give someone a pass, right? Because you're like, oh, they're normally not racist in any way, but they kind of do this once in a while. Or the people I work with who are on a spectrum where they're, you know, not outspoken one way or the other, kind of like nudging them to be more actively anti-racist is like, that's been where more and more of the hard conversations have been happening, and they're hard because they're more subtle than really blatant.
I think I like just to chime in. This is kind of a slightly different perspective, but yeah, just I've had a lot of introspection. I think with everything that's happening, I think when it comes to like trans folks and educating people on things like that, I am not trans, but I think being, I want to say at least an ally, is these conversations important for, you know, that community, because as someone who's like director of operations of my organization, I have to make sure that we are like continuing to have those sort of conversations and making space. And so like as an organization, we have created space to have monthly conversations with the team, just open dialogue with like maybe some simple prompts in general, just to address different topics, and also like having anti-racism training. We've also have built out affinity groups. So like the people who identify in like one cohort, like the white staff, are meeting together to have like a dialogue with each other about anti-racism and best practices moving forward, and kind of going over research that they've found and having that open dialogue and creating that space for that. And then for the our staff is not that diverse. We just have like white and black, unfortunately. But with that being said, we have like black staff come together, and we have our own affinity group and talk about different things in our mind, different articles. And I think the organization just needs to create those spaces for this conversation to happen. It has to be built in, and like the boss top down has to be like, we're going to pay for this. And really it's more of it's not even a cost you actually see, because you're already paying the staff. It's just more about making time in your curriculum and just like your training plans to have that space, and then move forward for your 2020 budgets, and I'm sure 2021 budget, 2022. If you're big companies, I'm sure you're already looking at your 2021 budget year. And so like planning things like that, and planning what your ties into like the human resources aspect of not just checking a box and making a plan, say, hey, this is our statement, but also living that statement, putting it in to how your organization behaves and acts, and creating those in your, you know, if you have your huddles, and just like really embedding that into it. And I think that's how you create space for that, so that people always have a comfort level to say those things and talk about those things. And then in terms of just like, I kind of went on a tangent, but when it comes to like could talk about my friends and things like that, I've definitely heard people say problematic statements about trans people who were in my own cohort of friends, and I've had to check them, you know what I mean? And so like, And you're like, well, what do you know? And I'm like, well, I don't know, but I know this is wrong. You know what I'm saying? So like, and just, I think sometimes if you're not fully educated, that's okay. But just if you know something's wrong, at least checking them and letting them know that like that's not cool, and hopefully you can have a conversation about that further. And I know that can be exhausting, trying to educate and have a dialogue with someone instead of necessarily have an argument. I think everyone's so combative. Sometimes it's like they just want to yell at each other, but it should just be a conversation.
Yeah, it is. All right, so I'm gonna get to our last question, which I think is a real doozy to end on, and this is another one of these fun conversation questions. What other companies in the industry do you think are doing it right in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or at least have their hearts in the right places? Like, what other brands aside from yourselves? Because we want to
like, do you think your brand is doing it right? Is the question also, right?
Kate, we'll start with you. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Right.
No, go, Brooke. You got it.
I was going to give a shout out to Machines for Freedom as a company that I feel like is doing a good job, at least from what I can tell from outside of the company, with both, looking at, people of color, as well as looking at, different body types, just lots of diversity, sexual orientation. Even though it's a women's brand, I love how they are very welcoming to anyone and everyone, and they're very I think they're doing a good job from what I can tell.
Machines for Freedom. We'll have to take note of that.
I would echo that as well.
Well, and I would have said both of your brands if you guys weren't here, but since you're here, I brand. But
no, but you're absolutely right. I think they've done a really great job there as well, and probably I think Specialized has done a nice job with a lot of their messaging and some of their initiatives as well.
Specialized.
But it comes back to like how we started this conversation too. It's like you can do things externally, but then there's all this work to be done internally that no one can see unless they work for you or know someone who works for you. And that's where it gets tricky. Like SRAM, it might look on the outside like we're doing a good job, but shit, we got a lot of work to do internally. So props to Machines. I'm really impressed with what they're doing externally, but it's a hard question because you don't know these companies from the inside and what it's like to work for them.
Mm-hmm. But great. So, Kate, do you think that at SRAM, like, there's a lot of work to do? But what's most important, I think, that could be the base of it is like, is there a collective awareness that there is more work to be done? Because if there's an awareness that, oh man, we need, we really need to improve A, B, and C, then the chances of those of that change happening are they increase. Like, so what do you think that people know, like, are aware of that?
I think we've made a big step forward. We have the message coming from our CEO now that, this is really important. At the Bicycle Leadership Conference coming up, our CEO is encouraging every single person who works for the company to attend Aisha's session. And so that's the type of sort of message that this is important and you need to participate in this education that we've never had before. So there's still room to get better, but I think it's changed a lot in the last 4 or 5 months. So it helps when it comes from the top of the company, and there's a degree of sort of like I guess empathy and taking your ego out of it, and understanding that you're not going to do it right, and that it's a journey. And so it helps having our CEO, Ken Loosberg, demonstrate that.
Okay. Brooke, you wanna chime in on that as well? I think I cut you off before. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no. I tend to just go on and on. So, I think that internally there is that awareness. And again, for Live, it's something that I really was aware of when I came the brand 4 years ago because I had the opportunity to do some work and attend diversity training myself. I had a really life-changing experience where I had white privilege explained to me in a very powerful way, and my life was changed. And so that's something that coming into the bike industry again, and seeing a predominantly white male coworkers and industry-wide, it feels a little overwhelming on how we can take steps forward. But I do think that training and leadership is important. To Kate's point, is it's like the grassroots and the grass tops. You need to enable and empower all employees to have that conversation. But I also want to give a lot of, I guess, I want to do my best and assume positive intent, and knowing the power and the life-changing training that I had and how it changed everything in my life, and how it's obviously still progressing day by day. And through your leadership, I'm learning more and more. But I want to think that if they're not aware, it's more of a we need the training even more. And I hope that the training is going to make them aware and really open their eyes to how white privilege, as well as sort of just creating a more safe place and more diverse culture for a lot of reasons, but being great allies and advocates for the process at all levels. Again, I think that's a lot. I can't even remember if I answered the right question, but yes, we have awareness. I've had awareness. Our brand has had awareness, but we still make a lot of mistakes, and we're learning as we go. But again, this is a journey, and we're committed.
Beautiful. Well, listen, guys, I want to thank all of you for coming on. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your work day to come and start this conversation. We, the Black Foxes, we love working with all of you, and we look forward to continue working together as allies in this. I don't want to say battle, but in this work that needs to be done, doing this good work together. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for everything you're doing so far, and sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you all.
We will all be in touch, and enjoy the rest of today's Wednesday. Yes, enjoy the rest of your week, and yeah, I hope that, like Brooke, just to chime in on what you said at the beginning, I hope that we can all have a chance to do it face to face soon.
You too.
That's a lot of faces, Marty.
It is. I think I got everyone.